Uncle left me his worthless antique shop, but the hidden room behind his office changed everything. The day Uncle Harold passed away was one of the hardest days of my life. He wasn't just an uncle to me, he was more like a father figure, someone who had been there through every broken heart, every failure at school, and every moment when I felt like the world didn't understand me. When his lawyer handed me the envelope containing his will, I braced myself for what it might say. But nothing could have prepared me for this. To my dear niece Clara, I leave behind my most cherished possession, Harold's curiosities. I stared at those words in disbelief as they echoed in my mind over and over again. Cherished possession? That old, dusty antique shop on the corner of Maple Street? It was barely staying afloat, surviving off the occasional tourist or nostalgic neighbor stopping by to browse its cluttered shelves. The windows were streaked with grime, the wooden floors groaned underfoot, and the air inside always carried the faint scent of mothballs and aged wood. How could Uncle Harold think this place held any value? As I stood outside the shop later that afternoon, staring up at the faded sign above the door, tears welled in my eyes, not from grief alone but also from frustration. Why would he burden me with something so impractical? My life was already complicated enough. I worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet, juggling bills and dreams that seemed further away with each passing year. And now, instead of leaving me some money or even a simple keepsake, he left me this relic. But Uncle Harold had never done anything without reason. He was meticulous, thoughtful, almost maddeningly deliberate about everything. If he believed this shop meant something, then maybe there was more to it than met the eye. With a deep breath, I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The bell above the entrance jingled softly, announcing my arrival into the dimly lit space. Dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of sunlight streaming through the grimy windows. Shelves lined every wall, crammed with objects ranging from porcelain dolls with cracked faces to tarnished silver candlesticks. A glass display case near the front counter held mismatched pocket watches and rusted keys. In the center of the room stood a long table covered in yellowed books, chipped figurines, and other odds and ends. For a moment, I simply stood there, letting the weight of the place settle over me. Memories flooded back. Childhood afternoons spent sitting cross-legged on the floor while Uncle Harold told me stories about the items around us. Each piece, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, had a tale. Some were funny, others tragic, but all were imbued with a sense of wonder that only Uncle Harold could conjure. My gaze drifted toward the back of the shop, where a narrow hallway led to his office. That room had always been off-limits to me growing up. Business matters, he'd say with a wink whenever I asked why I couldn't go in. Now though, curiosity tugged at me. Maybe if I looked around I'd find something, a note, a ledger, anything, that would explain why he thought this shop was worth inheriting. The office door creaked as I opened it, revealing a modest space dominated by a heavy oak desk piled high with papers. Faded maps hung on the walls, and a rickety bookshelf sagged under the weight of leather-bound volumes. As I began sifting through the clutter, I noticed something odd about the far wall. There was a faint outline etched into the plaster, almost invisible unless you were standing close enough to see it. Heart pounding, I pressed my hands against the wall, searching for a seam or latch. After several tense minutes, my fingers brushed against a small indentation hidden beneath a loose strip of molding. I pushed gently, and the wall shifted slightly before swinging inward with a soft click. Behind the office wall lay a hidden room, untouched by time. The air smelled different here, cleaner, cooler, and the light filtering in from a single high-set window illuminated shelves upon shelves of artifacts unlike anything I'd seen in the main shop. These weren't dusty trinkets or forgotten relics, these were treasures. Gold coins gleamed in velvet-lined boxes, intricate jewelry sparkled under the light, and ancient scrolls rested carefully in protective cases. At the center of the room sat a pedestal holding a small, ornate box carved with symbols I didn't recognize. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped closer, running my fingers lightly over the smooth surface of the box. Whatever this was, it clearly meant something important to Uncle Harold. Was this the real reason he'd left me the shop? Had he known all along that I'd discover this secret? Over the next few days, I became consumed with uncovering the truth. Every spare moment was spent in the hidden room, examining the artifacts and trying to piece together their significance. Some items came with notes written in Uncle Harold's neat handwriting, detailing their origins and histories. Others remained mysteries, their stories locked away in silence. One evening, as I sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by scrolls and documents, I found a journal tucked inside a hollowed-out book. Its pages were filled with sketches, cryptic phrases, and detailed descriptions of the items in the room. Flipping through it, I realized this wasn't just a collection, it was a map. A map leading somewhere, but where? The entries grew increasingly urgent toward the end, mentioning a final destination, and warning of dangers along the way. One passage stood out in particular: Clara must know the truth. She is the key. My stomach churned as I read those words. What truth? What did he mean by the key? Determined to follow the trail Uncle Harold had laid out, I started making plans. But the deeper I delved into the mystery, the more questions arose. Who else knew about this room? Had Uncle Harold been protecting it, or hiding it, from someone? And what exactly was waiting for me at the end of this journey? The first step took me to an old library downtown, where I hoped to find answers among the archives. Armed with a list of references from the journal, I scoured dusty tomes and microfiche records, piecing together fragments of information. One name kept appearing: Elias Montrose, a 19th-century explorer rumored to have uncovered a legendary artifact known as the Heart of Eternity. According to legend, the heart granted immense power to whoever possessed it, but at a terrible cost. Could that be what Uncle Harold had been searching for? And if so, why had he involved me? As I dug deeper, I began noticing strange coincidences. People watching me from across the street. Whispers following me in crowded places. Once, I returned to the shop to find the lock on the front door tampered with, though nothing appeared to be missing. Paranoia crept in, tightening its grip with each passing day. Yet I couldn't stop. Not when I felt so close to understanding what Uncle Harold had sacrificed everything to protect. One night, unable to sleep, I returned to the hidden room and opened the ornate box on the pedestal. Inside lay a single object, a compass made of blackened metal, its needle spinning wildly despite being indoors. As I held it in my hand, a surge of energy coursed through me, leaving me dizzy and disoriented. When the sensation faded, I noticed something new. The needle had stopped moving, pointing directly at the wall. Following its direction, I discovered another hidden compartment concealed within the stone. Inside was a rolled-up parchment tied with a red ribbon. Unfurling it revealed a map marked with locations spanning continents and centuries. At the bottom, written in Uncle Harold's unmistakable script, were 3 words: "Trust your instincts." Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the map to my chest. For the first time since inheriting the shop, I understood why Uncle Harold had chosen me. This wasn't just about uncovering secrets or finding treasure, it was about proving to myself that I was capable of greatness, that I could carry the torch he had passed to me. With renewed determination, I began preparing for the journey ahead, packing supplies, studying routes, and memorizing clues from the journal. But as the departure date approached, doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve. What if I failed? What if the dangers Uncle Harold warned about proved too much for me to handle? On the morning I planned to leave, I stood once more in the hidden room, gazing at the artifacts surrounding me. They weren't just objects, they were pieces of a puzzle, fragments of a legacy left unfinished. Taking a deep breath, I whispered a silent promise to Uncle Harold. "I'll finish what you started," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Whatever it takes." And with that, I stepped out into the unknown, the compass warm in my pocket and the map guiding my way. Little did I know, the adventure awaiting me would test not only my courage but also the very essence of who I was. The journey began with a train ride to the first location marked on the map, an abandoned monastery nestled in the misty hills of Scotland. As the landscape blurred past my window, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of someone lingering too long at the edge of my vision or hear footsteps echoing behind me when no one else seemed to be there. My instincts screamed caution, but Uncle Harold's words echoed louder: "Trust your instincts." When the train finally pulled into the tiny station near the monastery, a cold drizzle greeted me. Wrapping my coat tighter around myself, I made my way up the winding path toward the crumbling stone structure perched atop the hill. The air smelled of damp earth and moss, and the only sounds were the rustling leaves and distant cries of birds. It felt like stepping into another world, one untouched by time. The map had led me here for a reason, though I wasn't sure what awaited me inside those ancient walls. According to the journal, Elias Montrose had once sought refuge in this very place during his travels. He'd hidden something valuable within its depths, something tied to the heart of eternity. But finding it wouldn't be easy, the journal hinted at traps and riddles designed to protect whatever lay buried beneath the monastery. As I pushed open the heavy wooden door, creaking on rusted hinges, a shiver ran down my spine. Inside, the air was thick with decay and shadows danced across the walls as light filtered through broken stained glass windows. The floor was littered with debris, fallen beams, shards of pottery, and piles of rotting books. Yet despite the ruin, there was an undeniable sense of history here, as if the stones themselves whispered secrets from centuries past. I pulled out the compass Uncle Harold had left me, its needle spinning wildly before settling on a direction deeper into the building. Following its guidance, I navigated through narrow corridors and crumbling staircases until I reached a room unlike any other. Its ceiling soared high above, supported by towering columns carved with intricate symbols. At the center stood an altar, cracked and weathered but still bearing faint traces of gold leaf. And resting atop it was a small leather-bound book. My heart raced as I approached, half expecting some trap to spring into action. But nothing happened. Carefully, I opened the book and found pages filled with cryptic writings and diagrams resembling constellations. Flipping through them, I realized this wasn't just a diary, it was a guide. A guide to deciphering the next part of the map. Suddenly, a noise startled me, a low guttural growl reverberating through the chamber. Whirling around, I saw movement in the shadows. A figure emerged slowly, their face obscured by a hood. They carried a staff topped with a glowing crystal, its light casting eerie reflections against the walls. "Who are you?" I demanded, clutching the book tightly to my chest. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they tilted their head, studying me with unsettling intensity. Finally they spoke, their voice low and gravelly. "You shouldn't have come here." "I'm looking for answers," I said, trying to keep my tone steady despite the fear bubbling inside me. "Answers about the heart of eternity." At the mention of the name, the figure stiffened. For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. Then, without warning, they lunged forward, swinging their staff with surprising speed. Instinctively, I ducked, narrowly avoiding the blow. Adrenaline surged through me as I scrambled backward, searching for anything I could use as a weapon. But before either of us could make another move, the ground beneath our feet trembled violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. The figure froze, their expression shifting from aggression to alarm. Without a word, they turned and fled into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as they'd appeared. Breathing hard, I stayed rooted to the spot, waiting for the shaking to subside. When it finally did, I noticed something new. A section of the wall had collapsed, revealing a hidden passageway. Gathering my courage, I stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the oppressive gloom. The tunnel led downward, spiraling deeper into the earth until I emerged into a vast underground chamber. In the center stood a pedestal identical to the one in Uncle Harold's hidden room, except this one held not a box but a single object, a shard of obsidian glinting faintly in the dim light. As I reached out to touch it, visions flooded my mind, flashes of fire and destruction, whispers of power corrupting those who wielded it. Gasping, I pulled my hand back, heart pounding. Whatever this shard was, it was dangerous. Dangerous enough that people would kill, or die, to possess it. And yet, I knew I couldn't leave it here. If Uncle Harold had entrusted me with this quest, then it was my responsibility to see it through. Securing the shard in my bag, I retraced my steps back to the surface. By the time I emerged into the gray afternoon light, exhaustion weighed heavily on me. But there was no time to rest. The compass was already pointing toward the next destination, a sunken temple off the coast of Greece. The flight to Athens was a blur of anxiety and anticipation. With each passing mile, I felt the weight of the task ahead pressing down on me. Whoever or whatever had sent that hooded figure after me wasn't going to stop. And now, knowing what I did about the shard, I understood why. This wasn't just a treasure hunt, it was a race against forces far greater than I'd imagined. Arriving in Greece, I hired a local fisherman to take me to the coordinates marked on the map. The sea was calm, its surface shimmering under the Mediterranean sun, but beneath the beauty lay danger. According to the journal, the temple had sunk centuries ago after a catastrophic earthquake, taking its secrets with it. Divers had tried exploring it over the years, but none had returned alive. "You're sure about this?" the fisherman asked skeptically as we anchored above the site. His weathered face betrayed both concern and curiosity. "I don't have a choice," I replied, tightening the straps on my diving gear. Slipping beneath the waves, I descended into a world of muted colors and eerie silence. Schools of fish darted past me, and shafts of sunlight pierced the water, illuminating fragments of marble and stone scattered across the seabed. As I swam deeper, the outline of the temple came into view, a sprawling complex overtaken by coral and seaweed. Inside, the architecture was breathtaking, even in its ruined state. Statues of gods and goddesses lined the halls, their faces eroded by time but still exuding an aura of majesty. Following the compass, I navigated through labyrinthine corridors until I reached a sealed chamber. Carved into the door was a familiar symbol, the same one etched onto the ornate box in Uncle Harold's shop. Using tools from my belt, I worked painstakingly to pry the door open. When it finally gave way, I entered a room filled with treasures beyond imagination. Gold statues, gem-encrusted crowns, and ceremonial weapons adorned every surface. But at the center of it all stood a pedestal holding a second shard, identical to the one I'd retrieved from Scotland. As I reached for it, a shadow moved in the corner of my vision. Turning sharply, I saw a pair of glowing eyes watching me from the darkness. Before I could react, a massive creature emerged, a serpent-like beast with scales that shimmered like oil slicks and fangs dripping venom. Panic gripped me as it lunged forward, forcing me to dive out of the way. Desperation fueled my movements as I fought to evade the creature, using the temple's ruins to my advantage. Each swipe of its tail sent shockwaves rippling through the water, dislodging chunks of stone and sending clouds of silt billowing around us. Just when it seemed like escape was impossible, I remembered something from the journal. Sound could disrupt the creatures guarding these relics. Grabbing a metal rod from the debris, I struck it against a nearby column, creating a sharp, resonant clang. The serpent recoiled, momentarily stunned. Seizing the opportunity, I grabbed the shard and bolted for the exit, my lungs burning as oxygen dwindled. Bursting to the surface, I gasped for air, clutching the shard tightly. The fisherman helped me aboard, his eyes wide with disbelief. What in God's name was that? I wish I knew, I muttered, collapsing onto the deck. Back on land, I examined the two shards side by side. Together, they formed part of a larger pattern, hinting at the shape of the heart of eternity. But as I pieced them together, a realization dawned on me. Retrieving the remaining shards wouldn't just require skill and bravery, it would demand sacrifices I wasn't sure I was ready to make. Uncle Harold's voice echoed in my mind once more, "She is the key." What had he meant? Was I destined to unlock the heart's power, or destroy it? With two shards secured and countless questions swirling in my mind, I prepared for the next leg of the journey. The map pointed eastward now, to a remote mountain range in Nepal where monks guarded ancient knowledge. But as I packed my bags, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time. Whoever was hunting me, and the shards, was closing in. And somewhere deep inside, I feared that the closer I got to the truth, the more I might lose along the way. As I boarded the plane to Nepal, the weight of the shards in my bag felt heavier than ever. Each step forward brought me closer to answers, but also to dangers I could barely comprehend. Uncle Harold's belief in me was unwavering, but doubt gnawed at my resolve. What if I wasn't strong enough? What if the heart demanded more than I could give? The monks awaited, their secrets hidden behind veils of mist and prayer. Somewhere beyond them lay the final pieces of the puzzle, and perhaps the truth about why Uncle Harold had chosen me. My hands trembled as I clutched the map, its edges worn from constant handling. In that moment, I realized the journey wasn't just about finding the heart, it was about discovering who I truly was. And though fear shadowed every step, one thought kept me moving forward. Uncle Harold believed I could do this. Whatever waited for me in the mountains, I would face it, not for power or glory, but for the legacy he'd entrusted to me. The compass needle steadied, pointing ahead. I took a deep breath and stepped into the unknown, ready to finish what we'd started together.